questions for about 20 minutes before asking your questions. Please state your name and affiliation. We are webcasting this press conference, so please use the wireless microphone, which my colleague, who's at the back, will bring you if you raise your hand. We'll do one question and one quick follow-up to ensure everyone gets a chance, and we'll see how much time we have left after that. The Governor will be happy to answer questions in both official languages. Avant de poser une question, prière de vous identifier. Je vous demanderai également d'utiliser le micro sans fil. Libre à vous de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Governor Poloz is now ready to take your questions. We'll start with Greg Quinn.
Greg Quinn, Bloomberg News. You may have seen Finance Minister Bill Morneau flew to London to talk about the dangers of Brexit. Mark Carney has been talking a bit about it. Given that this dialogue is ramping up, do you have anything further to say now about the consequences of a Brexit decision?
No, I don't think I do. We are standing ready for, there may be some market volatility next week in the wake of that vote. In fact, today with the kind of closely balanced kind of outlook that's embedded in the market, regardless of what the outcome is, there will be a market reaction. And but that's central banks are always ready for those kinds of bits of volatility, and so we would respond like that. As for the fundamentals, we simply will wait and see what the outcome is and analyze them when we know.
The IMF and OECD gave some reports on Canada's overall economy, and they mentioned housing and consumer debts as a risk, which you have, but they also identified that some of these things may require local housing market solutions. They pointed to Toronto and Vancouver. I know there's coordination at the federal level, but is there something missing in Canada now? Is the ball in the court of municipal, provincial authorities, and is the federal government able to manage that kind of process efficiently?
Well, I don't have any specific comment to make on that. All we've done is to point out that on our analysis, those Vancouver in particular, and probably Toronto also, are seeing price increases that we can't really justify on the basis of fundamental analysis. And therefore, it's important that people make those decisions not based on extrapolating those performances forward. To us, of course, it is an important risk to the financial system, but one we analyze and find that it's, the probability that it would be triggered is low and probably declining through time as the economy strengthens. So all that to say that I don't think I have any specific recommendations, as I said before. Whatever advice we may offer would be in our normal channels, not through the media.
Good, thank you. We'll go to our right.
Hi, my name is Rhiannon Russell. I'm a freelancer with Thomson Reuters. You spoke about companies operating near their capacity limits boding well for future investment spending. Do you think companies might be more tempted to stay at capacity and miss out on potential opportunities rather than take a risk on spending?
Well, that's a judgment call, and it would probably vary from company to company. And certainly we can see that it varies from sector to sector. So if we look at the capacity utilization figures that came out just a week ago, you can see a number of sectors that are actually above their historical average capacity. That can happen, but usually it doesn't last for a long time. You translate that into what happens at the company level. The company receives an order for more product, and it's a good customer, say one of their U.S. customers, and they have to call that customer and say, I'm excess demand, I can't really fulfill that order for, say, 6 months, something like this. Well, then they will probably lose that customer as a result of that. And so I think this is the risk management problem that the firm has. It's not as simple as, the situation's risky, so I don't want to invest. They have to weigh that the riskiness around new investment and expansion against the riskiness of their base business if they disappoint customers by not being able to fulfill their orders. And so my reading of that situation is that we're getting close to where that balance is tipping. Anecdotally, companies are telling us they're probably going to expand soon because they're feeling those stresses. So all we can do is continue to watch the numbers, and we'll report as they unfold. But our guess, guess is the wrong word. Our forecast is that in the second half of this year, more of that shows up in the data, and that there'll be enough so that investment starts to become a positive source of growth, whereas it's been negative since the oil shock happened. So we have obviously lower investment in the energy sector. We're watching for the other investment sectors to pick up and to offset that in our numbers.
In the FSR, you spoke last week about how the potential for a downturn in home prices in Toronto and Vancouver is growing. Do you still expect a soft landing in those markets, or is the potential for a disorderly correction in those markets also growing?
So we've said that the rate of price increase that we've seen there is unlikely to be sustained. That admits a wide range of possible paths for the future. You could have just slower price increases or zero price increases, or, as we said, possible to have a decline in prices, but we're not predicting that. We're just saying that if there is a risk of a decline in prices, there's no doubt that that risk is growing. I just don't know how big of a risk it actually is. Because in both of those markets, the fundamentals are very strong. We have new immigration, both international and interprovincial. So we have population growth in those cities, therefore a brand new demand for housing. We have job creation. 80% or so of all the jobs that have been created over the last year have been created in those areas of the economy. So we know the economies themselves are very strong. So how much of the behavior we see is just more demand for housing against a constraint, which is that there's not quite enough supply to satisfy it all. And how much of a supply response can there be to that increased demand? So we just want people to understand that if they are basing their decision on fast rises in prices, they should rethink that, because that's unlikely to continue. But they can base their decision on many other things. So it doesn't mean they suddenly stop. So I know I'm not answering your question directly, but it's basically because I don't have a direct answer to that. But that's the thinking which is around your question. And so, yes, there is a risk that there would be a decline, but I don't know how great that risk is, and I'm not predicting it. Soft landing is a very fuzzy kind of concept. It is that usually what we mean is the fundamentals gradually justify where you are. And that remains possible, as I said, if prices simply moderate and the economy continues to strengthen. So I have to admit that the soft landing scenario is still one of the possibilities of all the possibilities you could list. But it's hard to predict at this stage. Okay?
Clausanne Sanson, Radio-Canada.
Les impacts économiques, selon vous, au plan national, des feux de Fort McMurray, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, il y a deux choses qui touchent l'économie. La première, c'est qu'on a coupé la production du pétrole, c'est presque 1 million de barils par jour. Et il y a une incertitude concernant quand ils vont recommencer la production, la première chose. Deuxième chose, c'est que tout le monde était évacué. Alors, tous les travaux normaux n'étaient pas là. Alors, le PNB va toucher par ça. Et le recommencement de tout cela, ça va prendre beaucoup de temps. Et troisième chose, c'est la reconstruction. Ça va commencer, mais pas immédiatement. Alors, c'est une analyse très difficile à faire. sauf pour le pétrole. Ça, c'est facile. Alors, pour ça, on estime il y a peut-être 1,5%, 1,4%, je m'excuse, 1 à 1,4% de croissance d'impact sur l'économie durant le deuxième trimestre. Et il y aura une augmentation de croissance durant le troisième trimestre, qui est peut-être assez grand parce que nous avons de croissance normale, plus le recommencement de production de pétrole. Alors, avec un pattern comme ça, c'est possible que le niveau de la croissance pour les 2 trimestres au moyen est, grosso modo, le même qu'on a prévu. Mais pour le moment, ce n'est pas très assuré.
Justement, on sent que vous voulez vous faire rassurant par rapport à l'économie canadienne, mais vous parlez de beaucoup d'incertitudes, beaucoup de risques. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer ces principaux risques à l'économie canadienne et peut-être les signes prometteurs que vous voyez, peut-être pour des secteurs comme le Yukon qui dépendent beaucoup des ressources naturelles?
Oui, mais les risques les plus importants que j'ai mentionnés, premièrement, c'est le risque autour de l'économie américaine. Deuxièmement, il y a un lien, c'est la performance de nos exportations. Et troisièmement, c'est la performance de l'économie en ajusté. Ça ajuste au prix pétrole plus bas. Et le quatrième, c'est le risque autour des consommateurs. Les consommateurs ont beaucoup de dettes. Ils peuvent commencer peut-être à épargner plus. Alors, tous ces risques sont là. Et il y a beaucoup de certitudes, mais ça c'est à peu près normal. Il y a toujours des incertitudes, on fait les prévisions. Alors, moi, j'identifie les forces qui sont positives. Ils sont là. Les exportations, il y a beaucoup de catégories qui sont beaucoup en hausse depuis la récession. Et ça, c'est une marge de progrès. Mais ce n'est pas le total, c'est juste des catégories spécifiques qui sont le lien est plus intime avec les États-Unis. Ça, c'est l'expansion la plus importante. Alors, pour ça, il faut d'être patient parce que ça prend du temps. Et la deuxième phase de ça, c'est quand les entreprises commencent à investir. C'était la question. Investir, ça c'est la prochaine phase, et il y a la création des emplois. On a vu seulement les exportations, pas les autres phases. Et c'est pourquoi nous sommes très prudents avec la prévision.
Any more questions? We might have time for a second round. Tyson?
Tyson Footer with CKRW Radio. Governor, you mentioned during your speech earlier tonight about the recent surge in oil prices, of course, but mining potentially won't follow suit. Mining is a big part of the Yukon and Yukon's economy.
Yeah.
What can you say to that in regards to why you don't feel it'll follow suit behind oil?
Okay. Well, the reason would be that so far there has not been a significant recovery in global demand for commodities. What we've seen, in fact, in the case of oil, has been supply reductions through the collapse in investment, which is pretty well a global phenomenon. And in particular, we've seen a reduction in supply from the shale oil plays in the U.S. And originally, there was an extra almost 5 million barrels excess supply. And it was almost exactly equal to the amount of new supply from shale plays in the U.S. So basically, that's the size of the excess supply that needs to be worked off. So gradually, that's been coming down, and then we have some other disruptions globally that have reduced supply. They could be temporary, but either way, that's why prices have come back into sort of the high 40s. More importantly from our analysis is that the companies we talk to say that with prices, below $60, they're still going to cut investment spending. So now let's move to other commodities. So there's no extra new demand. It's not the world has not suddenly gotten strong, caused oil prices to go up. Now, what about other commodities? Well, commodities, in addition to oil, that's a supply issue too. So new investments, lots of new investments in the commodity space over the last few years because prices were so high. Now, think about what that means. It's not little bits of supply. It's like when you open a new copper mine, that's a big increase to the overall supply in lumps. But demand only grows in a gradual process. So then you have a lump of new supply. So you have an overhang of supply, and it can last for a period of years because of the lumpiness of the process. So what we have to then watch for is when do we catch up again? The second thing that goes with that is brand new supply is usually very efficient supply. It's brand new equipment, it's a brand new facility. So if you're an existing supplier of, say, copper, and you've been in business for some time, and a brand new copper mine opens somewhere in the world, copper is copper. And that new copper could be a more efficient or a less expensive supply source than yours. And so there's kind of a double shock that people have to then adjust to. And all I can say is it's probably going to take, when we say it's going to take a couple more years for these forces to be worked out, we mean that across the board, not just for oil. It's going to take time for that to work out, the demand side to catch up, and the supply side to adjust, and maybe improve their cost structures to compete with that new supply. So that's a process that we've seen right away in the oil market, and we're watching for it to happen in the other resource space too. The adjustment is undeniable. We can't suddenly make prices go back up. We could wait several years for a new commodity cycle to happen like before.
I guess finally, you mentioned, of course, the big topic tonight is the Canadian economy is progressing. Have you taken a look at maybe the Yukon economy? The Yukon government says that they're always banking a surplus, another surplus this year. Is that something that you've looked at, and has that? Do you feel that's the same thing?
Well, I won't comment on the fiscal situation, but on the economy, you and I just had a conversation around what has to happen in the commodity space. So that puts the burden of adjustment on Yukon economy, for sure. Now, the other side of the adjustment process is lower commodity prices have pushed down the Canadian dollar. They also, of course, had the Bank of Canada cut rates twice last year as part of that adjustment process. And so the question then is, what do the other parts of the economy do in response to those new conditions? And, of course, the continued expansion in the U.S. economy and the continued healing in the global economy. So all those things matter to the business outlook here, just as they do everywhere. And so what everybody mentions to me is, well, what about tourism? Well, that, by the way, is the second most important sector here, and it seems to be growing very well. And no wonder, because, as I said, the U.S. economy is strong, which is a big source of visitors. The Canadian dollar is much lower, so it's a bargain when you're going on a trip to Canada. It costs less to stay in the hotel and eat out and all that. And so when people are shopping for a vacation, they'll see that Canada is a good value and of course has a lot to offer. So that's one part of the adjustment, but other manufacturers would find the lower dollar perhaps of some assistance to their sales efforts. And so you have to watch those competing forces work their way through. I know it's a small economy and it's really got a lot of mining. So the negative part is going to be the most visible part for the time being.
We're almost out of time, Sydney? No, well, or we might have actually, well, we have maybe time for one quick question, one quick follow-up. If not, we can have one English, one French very quickly.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm Sydney Cohen. I'm with the White Horse Star. So sort of to follow up on Tyson's question about the resource economy in the Yukon, how can a resource-based region like the Yukon adjust to this sort of new normal of low prices?
Well, in this situation, the usual recommendation is diversification helps because other areas of the Canadian economy are growing much faster than the resource side of the Canadian economy. And so the service sector, in particular related to tourism, okay, and anything connected to that, are areas that appear to be growing very well across the whole country. And so I know that's just a partial answer, but so the other thing we saw in our meetings here was, not all resources are under stress. So for instance, the gold sector, yes, gold prices are lower than they were, but gold prices can be very profitable for some projects at the levels they're at. And so not every sector is under the same kind of stress. So, a new gold project, for example, could have plenty of scope for new jobs and new revenue for Yukon. So every one of these things is different. So I can't just generalize, but for the whole Canadian economy and therefore also for Yukon, what you need is an adjustment where there's less investment, less employment, less everything in the resource sector, and more all the other sectors. And the lower Canadian dollar is a facilitator of that process, and of course lower interest rates also a facilitator of that process. And with the backdrop of a still very strong U.S. economy, we have the most important ingredient there.
And let's just take one final one in French, since we only had two. And this will be the last question.
Okay.
Vous mentionnez que les ménages canadiens soutiennent sensiblement l'économie présentement dans ces temps difficiles pour des régions comme la Colombie-Britannique, le Yukon, où le marché immobilier est très dispendieux. Ça devient difficile pour les ménages de participer plus activement. Comment est-ce que vous entrevoyez l'avenir? Vous dites faut s'assurer que les ménages se sentent à l'aise de poursuivre.
Je comprends bien, mais franchement, je ne fais pas de prévision pour une ville ou une province, vraiment. Mais en général, c'est vrai que c'est le secteur des ménages qui ont fait les dépenses énormes. Ils ont emprunté beaucoup, ils ont les dettes pour la preuve. Mais dans certaines régions, par exemple en Vancouver, par exemple, le prix des maisons est en effet une barrière à ce progrès pour les ménages. Et c'est encore le cas. On suppose qu'il y aura plus d'espace, plus de maisons construites qui vont satisfaire cette demande. Mais c'est un processus très graduel.
Good, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Ça conclut la conférence de presse.